Not all laptops need to be portable. This is why the not so small monster we have today right here, the MSI Titan GT77, was born. And this is the biggest, angriest and most evil version of this scary thing. So here we have a laptop with 17.3 inches screen that already makes it not very portable. And the fact it has an extra 7.5 centimeters or 3 inches of heatsink on the back makes it even less portable. Still, if you need such a thing, who are you and what are you doing that you need such a thing at all? Well, yeah, I'm kind of exaggerating, but this is the laptop I had during my degree, and I used to carry it on my back several times a week, and this is way fatter and heavier and only 15 inches. And it's not that far off from that in terms of dimensions. But that was a different time, and today we have much better solutions, so I guess you probably know why you need such a monster, so let me know in the comments. And while you're down there in the comments, I would like to tell you I really appreciate your view, so consider subscribing, it would help us a lot. I can only imagine that the real use of this laptop is some kind of a workstation or gaming machine hybrid that is only supposed to be kind of portable. Let's say if you work in production and you are a mobile studio that moves around a lot, or maybe if you're a gamer with excess money and you have endless real estate, but you don't want to buy a stationary computer for each house separately. But of course, there must be demand, otherwise this thing wouldn't exist at all. And more than that, it's very cool in my opinion to get my hands on such fantastic and advanced hardware, because in a few years it will be some Intel i5 with a 7060 card that will reach more or less the same performance, and it will probably be in the size of an iPad. So after I got that out of the system, let's talk about what this computer has in it. Here we have the top of the line model of the GT77. It has a 17 inches mini LED screen that supports HDR and a resolution of 4K 144Hz, which is capable of reaching an extremely bright 1000 nits that will probably burn your eyes out. Just keep in mind it has a small haloing problem in cases of high contrast, a known effect that comes with mini LED. Coupled with this is an Intel i9-13980HX processor, which is particularly impressive for the reason that it is the first time in a long time that the leading mobile processor from Intel has almost the same identical specs as its stationary brother. It has 8 performance cores, 16 efficiency cores, which brings it to a total of 32 cores. And this thing is not a sucker at all. It can reach a maximum turbo speed of 5.6 GHz. Aha, and did you think it was over? No, there's a portable RTX 4090 GPU in here that has 16 gigs of VRAM memory, and this should fuel your eyes with sweet and beautiful and fast pixels. Of course, this has 64 gigs of DDR4, which is clearly not far-fetched for a computer such as this, and obviously you have an option to upgrade to 128, and even it comes with a 4 terabytes of SSD and NVMe. Well, that's about thumbs up the insane specs of this thing. Externally, we have a relatively solid computer here. Yes, it is huge, almost 40 centimeters by 33, but it's really not that thick compared to what you get here, 23 millimeters thick. And it's admittedly not very light, but also not very heavy either, weighing 3.3 kilograms or 7 pounds. It even has a mechanical keyboard with cherry tactile switches, which feel wonderful, probably the best keyboard I've felt on a laptop ever, not to mention that it feels way better than cherry brown switches. And the keyboard is even full size with a full F arrow keys and a numpad. Just keep in mind that all the smaller keys, like the numpad for example, feel like membrane switches and not the mechanical switch that the main keys of this keyboard has. Which is a bit annoying, but better than nothing for sure. On both sides of the keyboard we have a pair of excellent speakers that reach a serious volume and even sounds good while doing it. Under the keyboard we have the touchpad, which I think is coated with glass because it's pretty cool to the touch, and to its right we even get a fingerprint reader. On the right side we have a network connection, full-sized HDMI 2.1, mini DP port, 2 Type-C connections with Thunderbolt and a USB Type-A connection. And on the left side, we have a headphone microphone jack, card reader, 2 additional USB Type-A connections, and a power connector. And I want to take a second to talk about the power connection here and what it's connected to on the other side of it. This computer has a huge and heavy power brick, and the wires of this brick are very thick and cumbersome. Don't know if MSI had a different solution here, but consider that it lowers the portability effect of this computer even more and sending it something like 13 years back in time. In addition to that, the brick, the connector, and the entire area around it and above the keyboard gets very hot when the computer is under load. The bottom part also gets very hot, and this is not the computer you would want to put on your lap while working. The more serious problem is that the entire upper left area of the keyboard gets very hot while playing games, and this is already starting to interfere with usability. In prime 95 continuous load, the CPU stabilized on 92 degrees Celsius in its hottest core, but the package was a bit higher obviously at 94C. It's definitely high, but not unusual for a laptop. And yet in terms of performance, especially on the CPU, we see that the 13980HX give almost twice the performance compared to the 12700H, which is insanely impressive for this form factor. And it slightly even overtakes the 12900K, which is a desktop CPU with monstrous cooling, which puts this i9 13980HX, what a name, in a very good place even in relation to desktop CPUs. Oh, and if I mention the cooling, it has a monstrous 4-fan cooling system that doesn't put a jet plane to shame in full performance mode. Seriously, this computer is exceptionally loud when plugged in and running in load. In gaming, this PC rocks with performance that's comparable to an RTX 4070 Ti and even bypasses it a little bit when playing in 4K and takes some load off the CPU. You can see, for example, that in Horizon Zero Dawn we get a result of 150 frames per second at 1440p compared to the 168 on the 4070 Ti with the 13900K. But in 4K we get 95 in relation to 90. In CSGO we got 455 and 236 compared to 504 and 237. The result is the same in 4K. Control without ray tracing gave 147 and 82 frames per second against 163 and 84. And with ray tracing on, no DLSS, we got 99 and 50 frames per second against 103 and 51. Forza Horizon 5 on its highest setting with ray tracing gave 131 frames per second and 106 frames per second compared to 135 and 97. Doom Eternal without RT achieved an average of 342 and 200 frames per second compared to 415 and 230, which is the biggest gap we've seen in QHD so far. Not that it's critical in any way, it's still significantly above the screen's refresh rate. And with ray tracing on, without DLSS, I got 134 and 138 frames per second compared to 280 and 154. Still a gap, but much less significant. Cyberpunk is a new test for us, so I don't have data to compare to, but it's a great test because of its full use of ray tracing tech in the latest update of the game that allows you to play in full path tracing mode. So, without ray tracing, without DLSS, I got 112 frames per second in QHD and 55 in 4K. With ray tracing on the Ultra preset and DLSS on Auto, without DLSS 3 frame generation, I got 90 and 61 FPS, and with path tracing, I turned on DLSS 3 frame generation, which is limited to Nvidia 40 series only, and I got 89 and 55 frames per second. These are very impressive results in my opinion, especially those that are paired with DLSS for a game that was barely playable on a card as powerful as the 2080 when the game came out. Before I summarize, I want to talk about the battery status of this computer. When this computer is on battery, it works in a very quiet and cold mode. The CPU goes into a very economical state, even at full use. The thing is that in this situation, despite everything, the battery life is still not very impressive, and by default the computer limits FPS in games to 30. So not a very playable experience, and even if you remove this restriction, the performance is not very impressive. For example, Doom didn't run very well at all, even while playing at 1080p. It's just a meh 40ish FPS. This reinforces my point about the portability of this computer. You will be able to use it unplugged. It will be about 50% less powerful. It is still extremely powerful to work on, but not really a solution that can be taken around and be used where there is no power outlet near you. And while this laptop will cost you north of $4,000 at this configuration, I won't complain about the price that much. It really is a niche product, and those who need it probably know why and are willing to make the investment. What I find really beautiful here is mainly the fact that the hardware is pushed so far and so to the max, and it's a hint of what we can expect in the future in computers that are much more reasonable, both in price and size. Just to think that this kind of thin thing contains a monster that is at the level of a 3900K and a 4070 Ti, it's really very impressive. So that's it, and thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe downstairs, it really helps us a lot, and let us know in the comments what you thought of this MSI G77 monster. Peace out!